first thing is always start with loving yourself.
Yeah.
The moment that you feel off course and someone's coercing you to do something that doesn't feel aligned, or you think that you're starting to take steps out of things that are really misaligned, pull yourself back to center. Start there.
Beautiful.
Second, especially at the beginning of the year, since we're all doing New Year's resolutions, which, by the way, we should be always, I'm going to take away should because I hate that word. We always get to evaluate where we are in life and what we want, our goals we want to achieve. So if a big, hairy, audacious goal feels out of reach, do it anyway.
Welcome, everybody. Today, I am excited to welcome you to my podcast, Unleash Your Greatness. And today I have a special guest, Jocelyn Bellows. She is an author. She is a speaker, a coach, and I'm just excited to have her. She has a great energy about her, and I'm excited to talk to her today. So, Jocelyn, welcome. I appreciate you being on the show.
So welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and get to share the next hour or so with you and your listeners on all platforms. So yes, my name is Jocelyn Bellows. I am a breakdown to wake up coach based in Denver, Colorado, or outside of Denver, Colorado. I've been here a few years, originally hailing from New Jersey. So we had to have a little conversation before we went live. I had to ask about explicit language because I am from Jersey and something that happens. And anyway, it's funny enough that I actually exchanged a quick little quib on Facebook earlier today with a fellow Jersey compatriot who lives here in Colorado. And it literally just came through earlier today. So yes, I am a coach, an author, a speaker, TV host, and podcast host. So it's all exciting. And a mama. I have a 6-year-old somewhere in there. And yeah, so I am all those things. I do all those things, but really what I'm about is continuing to learn more and more about me, like continuing to remove all the garbage, all the layers of the conditioning that I've carried as my own throughout my lifetime. That's really what I'm about. And that's why I coach and speak and work with clients and write and produce my shows for that same reason. I want people, what I really expect, I'm going to take that word back. My purpose and my impact is for people to break through their own BS to really get back to the essence of themselves.
Yeah.
The soul having a human experience. My sister shared this yesterday on Earth School, which I totally love. So I'm totally using it now. I'll plug you later, Lauren.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I've actually heard that, this life is like a classroom where we're meant to learn and grow. And some people say it's a test, and we do have tests in there, but I think it is more of it's not a pass fail. Like one time you're going to pass or you're going to fail. It's a continual learning, growing process. And so I love that you said that. That's awesome. So you do all these things, and you're all about learning how to improve yourself, of course. Why did you get into that? What was the main reason? Because everybody has a reason, right? Usually people don't wake up when they're 10 years old and be like, I'm going to be a personal development person, right?
Yeah, no.
So most people have a journey to get there. And I want to just kind of hear your story a little bit of what brought you into this space.
Yeah. So the most pivotal, the one that I really tend to speak to, it's really what sparked my awakening. So moved here 3 years ago, like I said, from the East Coast. Yep. And at the time I was married with a 3-year-old son. And I had a few epiphanies during that first couple months of living in Colorado, where I really recognized how truly unhappy I was in my life. And on the outside, everything looked fantastic, right? I was married. Even though we had moved across the country, we still owned a very profitable business that was doing very well. However, in order to make the move, I actually walked away from a rather prolific career of my own. So yes, we had the business that we ran. It really was my husband's business, but let's face it, I was part of it.
Sure.
And I had my own career, and then we had this young child. And so on the outside, everything looked peachy because we both had our health. Our child was healthy and happy and strong and vibrant. The business was starting to falter a little bit with our move. But when I got here, when we really arrived in Colorado, and the whole purpose of Colorado, the big purpose of Colorado was to start again and start somewhere fresh because we both really loved and adhered to being very adventurous and outdoorsy and living a calmer, more open lifestyle. And Colorado really provided this beautiful platform for it. However, in making this move, I walked away from that career. So first it was the panic of now what? What do I do to make money?
Right.
I don't know who I am. Like, I don't know what I want to do. I didn't want to go back to the same industry. So that label was removed because up to that point, I defined myself by what I did, not who I was. And very soon after, we had an experience with the first day of preschool with my child, and my former spouse had a very adverse, in my opinion, adverse reaction to the day that morning that things unfolded. And I finally said I had enough. I was no longer going to accept and tolerate that behavior from him. So I blamed it him, I put it on him. And very soon after recognized, yes, he had his own stuff that he had to work through. I was not in love with me. I didn't love myself.
Yeah.
I given it all away to everyone else. I gave my happiness, my joy, my purpose, my reason for being on someone else. And so I filed for divorce, started working with my first coach, started to recognize all this garbage that I'd blamed someone else for, and had to really take ownership for how I was showing up in life. And so the journey began. That next chapter of my life began, of no more excuses, no more being a victim of my reality. Like, I got to step into this. I played victim because it really suited me well. I did so great in victimhood. I got all the attention I needed. I got all the things that I needed. But you know what that does? It just continues to deflate and debilitate you. You're still allowing someone else to give you what you need. And as I really started to untangle the stories of my victimhood, of my not enoughness, of the I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not a good enough cook, I'm not a good enough wife, I'm not a good enough mother, I'm overweight, blah, 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 all the garbage. I start to really dig through it and remove it. I actually started with posting on Facebook. Actually, that's where it began. I'd been a voyeur on life for so long, and everyone else having this wonderful life, and what was wrong with me, what was me, to that's crap. And let me just tell you guys what's happening in my world. And I really got on the court. And I didn't have that language back then, right? I just started sharing. I was like, hey, I had a crap day. This is what happened. Hey, I had a gorgeous moment today, and I want to celebrate it with you all. And it wasn't about receiving the likes and the attention and love, because I was like, no, that's not what I need. What I need to do is own my stuff. And for me, that was an exercise in vulnerability, just putting it all out there. What happened is people came out of woodwork. People that I had talked to 10, 15, 20 years. And then I had friends sending their friends to me and saying, my friend is going through this horrible point in their life, and she doesn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. She knows she needs to make a rapid change in her marriage or her job or whatever. I want you to talk to her about this, or talk to him about this. Or I had people directly asking me, and I was like, So no, coaching was not on my radar, not even remotely. It actually took another year. It took a year of that and these occurrences showing up for me, that I was like, oh, maybe I have something to share beyond just sharing my journey. Maybe there's actually more here. And thus the
Yeah.
coaching birth.
Cool.
And actually, my podcast was actually birthed before that because I started with interviewing entrepreneurs about why they were so excited about or excited might not be the right word, why they took a leap of faith in starting their own businesses. And I kind of got clearer and clearer around that messaging. But it was fascinating to me because there was such a commonality when people really step into building their own businesses. They're stepping into the faith of themselves. And that was so fascinating. I mean, like I was salivating over that. And that's where then the podcast began. Then I was like, wait a minute, I can. That's when the coaching. It took about 3 months later, 4 months later, for me to step into my coaching practice. And been fortunate that my former spouse and I had owned a few businesses back east before we moved out here. So I bore witness to how my former partner had shown up for himself. And I got to be there to build it. God, that's amazing. When you get to build your own community based on your passion, you're not reaching for the money. You're not reaching anything. You're showing up for yourself. And that is like lifeblood for me. It's just like, oh, how can this get any juicier? And so then the coaching began. And I just keep following the path, and I'm recognizing more and more where the writing, in fact, that's where I'm shifting and pivoting now, is in the TV shows also with that, is not only for me to continue to show up in my writing as a point of therapy, as a point of helping to continue to heal my traumas, it gives me opportunity to show up for myself in a way that I may not be able to verbally, right?
Mm.
And now I'm coaching others to do the same, which is phenomenal. Giving platform for other people to show up for themselves in their own healing journeys so that others can be impacted.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think lots of times people are scared to put what they're going through out on, the Facebook, social media, or even talk to friends or family because they don't want to feel weak or vulnerable. And so that's amazing that you had the foresight, I guess, to do that, and it created this amazing community around you, which is amazing as well. So kudos to you being willing to do that. And I love the fact that you talk about uh the survivor, or excuse me, not the survivor, but the victim mindset. I think so many people get caught in that victim mindset. I know I've been in that myself, and you want to blame everybody else for, you're not being happy or not being where you want to be. And so my personal belief is there's basically three types of main mindsets, and that is victim mindset, survivor mindset. And survivor mindset is the Eeyores of the world, where you ask them how they're doing, and like, oh, I'm okay, I'm surviving. And then there's the hero mindset, and that's when you're like, you know what, it doesn't matter. Superman gets kryptonite, he still fights through it. Batman gets punched, he continues to fight, and we can be those people. And it doesn't mean we're perfect, because there's not a superhero out there that is perfect. They all have their faults, but it means we can still show up. We can still do what we need to do to become better at what we want to become. So I love that you talked about that victim mindset, because so many people are stuck in that victim mindset. And it really took that wake up call from you, or for you and your husband to, and that story about you and your husband, where you woke up that day and you're like, I'm done with this. And I think lots of times we mirror people, right? Like we want to, when we're blaming somebody else, it's really because, like you said, you're not happy on the inside, and it's a mirror effect. You don't want to look at yourself in the mirror and say, it's really me that's not happy inside. And that's hard. That self-evaluation can be really tough.
Continual. I mean, quite literally, I don't know when this show will air. So But this happened literally to me this morning. So I started my morning by attending an online funeral of a friend of mine whose brother passed very suddenly, not from corona, from something else, but very suddenly. And that was it was the first time I really, I think, had a real deep sadness around death, which is unusual for me. I spent 10 years in the donation industry. I've been around death. I've been pretty comfortable with it. I now get that we're souls having a human experience and really fully embody that. And today it really impacted me. So I'm going to be writing about that. Second, the very next thing that happened this morning, my phone rang, and it was my former partner, my former husband, who calls because he heard a commercial on the radio for the book. Now, little backstory. I offered to, in the book, let me make it clear. I wrote the introduction in the chapter, and I was the head of the project because there are other authors who are involved in this. Sure. So here's a commercial about the book on the radio, which I was super ecstatic about, right? Like that makes me happy. I'm like, wow, cool, right? That was not his response. His was very different. And I had offered before we published to share the chapter with him before I published, not because I was going to change it. I just, it was like, this is a courtesy. We co-parent. I want him to have access to this. Sure. And so I offered it to him, and he said no. I said, okay, that's your choice. Well, today, having heard that commercial, and he called me in anger, and what did you say about me? And did you portray me as this all these awful, ugly things? And I said, well, first of all, no. I said, yes, I know, like we went through a period where I was doing that. I was blaming you for our problems. Yeah. And I didn't. And so I literally picked up the book and started reading to him what I wrote. And what I wrote and what I'll continue to write about is taking ownership for how I showed up in my victim and how it served me and how the person that failed the marriage, from my vantage point, not to say that he's not guilt-free, right? He has his own stuff. Yep. For me, I failed our marriage because I didn't love myself. And I didn't use my voice in a way that empowered me to give and receive from a place of strength. And there is a vast, vast difference when you show up in that way. And it's continual. I mean, here we are 3 years later, and his initial all the word slay on me, I could have very easily gone back into my trauma trigger, right? And I did for a moment. I started to feel like the tears welling, and I was like, wait, time out. This isn't mine. This is his. And so instead of going down the rabbit hole, I started the conversation. I stopped the conversation and said, what's this really about? What is this? What's happening here for you? No, I'm not perfect, you guys, by no stretch. I knew that I caught myself enough to say, I'm balanced enough right now, and I'm good. I'm solid within me that I can hold space for him so he can fall apart because he needed to do that. And that's okay, right? Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. I was wrote to, so I'm going to kind of go back here. Okay. When I decided to leave my marriage, I knew it was a very clear decision. It wasn't like a question. It was like, it's time. And I'd known it was coming probably for about 2 years, at least for me. And when I made the decision, I made the decision. And I remember the pieces that I was most concerned about was, when was I ever going to love again? Well, how could someone else love me when I'm this broken mess of being? And love had always been the center point of my entire victimhood in childhood and adulthood. I always felt like I was sitting on the outside of relationship. My friends were all married, got married and had kids, and I was still single through most of my 20s, and I didn't date much in my 20s, and he and I met in our late 20s. But being in a relationship was probably the piece that I was most desiring in my entire life, and here I am walking away from a marriage, right? And I had to answer that question for myself. when was it going to happen? But it wasn't about external. It was really, I came to learn, it was when is it going to be, when is it going to be enough? How much more do I have to do to love myself? Which is a bunch of BS, by the way. It's not about you doing, it's just about you being. And it's a continual process because I promised myself, I made a lot of commitments in the early stages of my ending of my marriage of I changed my diet, I stopped drinking, I released a lot of people from my life, I really focused on me. I promised myself I'd never repeat the patterns I had done in my marriage. So you talked earlier about lessons and how it's not a pass fail or test, not pass fail, there's continual learning. Right. Yeah, continual learning. So, I'd been in a divorce happened. I'd been in a relationship for a year. That ended over a year ago now. And I was still holding on to a component of that relationship and tying it to a person, anchoring it to a person.
Yeah.
So I literally had to write to that person because I was still holding on to it and not accepting the fact of where I was. And I wrote to him and I said, look, I know it's a year later and I still miss you. And I loved these components of you. I loved you who you are, but I didn't love you for who you are. And I didn't honor you for who you are. And the things that I took ownership of the good, bad, and ugly. And I was like, I'm honestly embarrassing to even write this. So here, I'm going to talk about it on podcast. The second podcast I've talked about it on today. I had to really honestly own that and say, look, I'm embarrassed to say that I still feel this way about you after a year because I feel like a crazy fool. And this is how I operate. And everyone does this. The moment that I sent it, there was such a release. All that weight was gone.
Yeah.
Whether this person responds or not is on him. If he reads it, if he doesn't read it, I will never know. I will never know.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the point. The point for me was I have to love and honor where I'm at in this journey so that I can be happy with where I am in this moment. And that's where everything switches. That's where we go from, I want and desire all these things. You can still have all those dreams, by the way. That doesn't go away, right?
Right.
Heroes love and honor where they are right in the moment, every single moment. And they bring themselves back. They bring themselves back. They bring themselves back. They bring themselves back. I have a very dear girlfriend who has been one of the shiniest, brightest lights that I've probably known in my entire life. And for a few years, she and I didn't communicate. And I will witness it as she was newly married. I didn't know her husband. She was overseas. I'd heard some pretty awful things about this person, and I created a story around it. And I didn't talk to her because I didn't support where she was. I had no idea what she was up to. We've since reconnected, really gone deep into the journey that she was on, and she was on a pretty tumultuous journey. And you know what? She shows up with a smile on her face every day and said, you know what? That period of my life was really tough. And here I am swinging and smiling, and I am okay. And yes, there are people that are no longer on her journey, in her life anymore. And that's okay because she loves and honors who she is, where she is. And she's always shown up that way, and she's going to continue to show up that way. Those are the heroes.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to touch back on just something you said or what you talked about a little bit when you were talking about the relationship ending with your husband.
Yeah.
And how you had that identity or that anchor, I think is the word you used, with that relationship. And when it ended, you felt like a part of you had left as well, and you didn't know if you had that worth to be loved and to be accepted. And I think that's pretty common, sadly enough, among lots of people who are in a relationship and then they leave the relationship, whether it's a spouse or a boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever. When they leave that relationship, now all of a sudden they're feeling this identity of I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of other people's acceptance. And What do you think was the biggest factor for you? I know you talked about a few things you did. You sent the email and things like that, but what was the biggest factor to help you get out of that and say, you know what, I am worthy of love. I am worthy of being accepted and and finding somebody again in the future who will love me because I love me, right?
I want to adjust one word though, not finding. It's not about finding. It's about showing up in your energy and your beauty,
Mm.
and you attract them. And,
Yeah.
and that's a different field and a different conversation. Um, However, it's being in a space where you're open and available and attracting someone who can be in partnership with you because you're open and available and loving who you are and your sanctity and in your autonomy. So what I that's such a loaded question. I did a lot. And I will start with this. This is probably the center point of it all. I had to unbecome everything I thought I was.
Mm. Yeah. So explain a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's really what it was.
Yeah.
I started to play in a lot of spaces I had never played in before. Um, it started with it started with the Facebook posts, and uh, I first of all I had removed Facebook from my phone, and I'd only post on my laptop, which I know, gosh, you do that. We do it. I post on Facebook whatever it was I had to say. I didn't look at anyone else's stuff, right? I just dropped my deposits and left.
Yeah.
And eventually, when I felt stronger, I started to actually read what people had to say because in the beginning, I didn't want to read that. I just didn't. I didn't want to get off course from me. Did that.
Yep.
I had changed my diet. I started my first nutritional cleanse program. I was not working, and I gave myself permission to not work for a while, for several months. I was very fortunate. I was gifted with a contract role for a period of time that more than covered my bills, and I could. And it was for me, it was very easy work. It didn't require a lot of my mental capacity, so that I really could focus on my healing. So I got very lucky with that. Plus, um, I had collected I had financially, I was very solid. Just put it that way. So I had the gift of time, and I gave myself time. I didn't beat myself up from where I was. I cried a lot because I was sad about some things, but I didn't beat myself up about whether I failed somebody else. Eventually, I didn't do that right away. It took some time too. I evaluated the people that were in my life. And the people that were in my life, because I didn't know many people who were here in my local circle, I stopped talking to them. I literally stopped talking to people that didn't feel good to me anymore because they brought me down. I was like, I don't need that weight anymore. And for someone who's a codependent, who hung on everybody else to lift herself up, that was huge. I turned my phone off for days on end, the days that my son was with his father. I turned my phone off, and I just didn't have a plan every day. I woke up in the morning, I was like, what's today going to bring? And I spent a lot of time in nature, solo hiking, to the point that, and is this going to be a video as well, video feed?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if anyone can see over my shoulders a picture of me on a mountainscape, that's actually the very first 14er I ever did. So here in Colorado, we have these wonderful peaks called 14ers that are over 14,000 feet. And so I started setting goals for myself of things I had never accomplished before. One of them was being out here on these long hikes. And 14ers can take me, not everybody, but me, anywhere from 6 to 12 hours to complete. And I go alone without music and occasionally making friends along the way on the trail. But generally, it was in silence. I spent a lot of time in silence. I turned my phone, I turned the TV off. I took a lot of precautions about really keeping the sanctity of what made me happy. And if it didn't make me happy, I didn't engage in it. And if it was a tough conversation or someone I didn't want to deal with, I just cut it off. And I said, look, this is just where I'm at. without apology, because there is no apology, by the way. You get to show up for things that you want to show up for, period. And you got to take ownership if you're doing something to hurt other people, which I was very conscious of. I was like, no, this is where I'm at. This is not malicious intent. It's me taking care of me. I started going out on my own. Like, we have, go to art walks on my own. I just did things by myself that I loved. And I stopped caring what people could possibly potentially think because I was sitting in a restaurant by myself. I just didn't care anymore. I let it go. So, and this was not like a one and done, right? This was over.
Yeah.
Started slowly, and it built and it built and it built and it built. I ran my first half marathon, and I was sort of hanging out with someone at the time who was a runner. And I remember him asking me, he's like, "Do you want me to run with you?" And I was like, "Why are you asking me?" I'm like, "Do you want to run?" I'm going to run. You can come if you want to, but you don't have to ask my permission,
Yeah.
That was a moment where like things really switched for me, because past me would have very easily said, codependent me would have been like, yes, I want you there. I need your support and need your love. And no, I didn't, because I was running for me, for nobody else. It was for me to tell myself, I am worth this, and I got this. Yeah, so it's a constant reassurance. And when things start to take you off track and you notice it does, cut it off and speak to it.
Yeah.
You don't owe that person anything, or people or experience or whatever. Acknowledge it for what it is. If you need to say, look, I'm done, and this is why, if you feel comfortable doing that, you can. You don't owe that to anybody else. All you owe it to is yourself.
True. Yeah, that's a great perspective to keep in mind. I firmly believe that as well. And I love that you said that so many times we worry about what other people think, and we need to get past that. I know that's one thing that I've struggled with in my life is, what are people going to think if I do this or if I do that, or do I look dumb on camera, right? Like even now getting on like this, I'm like, oh, the camera's right here in front of me, and I've got this breakout on my face right now. What are people going to think? And I just have to say, you know what? It doesn't matter, because it really, at the end of the day, most people probably wouldn't look at it and be like, oh, look at his face, right? Most people are just like, I like what I'm hearing. I like the message. I like what, and just like your people on Facebook, when you were starting to share your mess, is what I like to call it, right? Because we all have a mess, and that usually becomes our message, which is beautiful and scary at the same time. But when you were sharing your mess, people are like, I really resonate with what she's saying, because I know so and so is going through this, or I'm going through this. And so when we can put ourselves in that position where we're like, you know what, I got to get past what other people think, and I just have to be me, then it opens up a whole world of possibilities. And that's beautiful. And then the whole aspect of getting in nature, uh, you know, getting out by yourself and just becoming one with who you are is so powerful. I really think that self-reflection in that regard is one of the most powerful tools, even though it is one of the hardest tools, because people don't like to look at themselves and be like, uh, I need to work on this, or I need to do this or whatever. But when we can do that and be honest with ourselves, it opens up a lot of vulnerability and chance for growth. And it sounds like you've had a lot of that experience going out and hiking. And so thank you for sharing that.
It's about really giving yourself permission to be,
Yeah.
right? So, today it's not been like, someone asked me last night that he's like, did you have another really busy day? Because, I accomplish things during the day. I do, not every day. And yes, I have the things, right? Like I've got the show and the podcast, and blah, blah, blah. And it sounds like a lot. It does.
Yeah.
And there are days that I get myself into a hole of like, oh my God, what did I just do? Why did I sign up for all this? I also, and this is really important, and this is something that I really talk about with my clients and anybody actually, schedule time for yourself.
Yeah.
And I schedule myself a lot of times. So like today, yeah, I had my things in the morning. I had things unexpected. Then I had, I recorded a show earlier in the day, and I had about an hour and a half between that and coming on with you today. And I could have very easily just continued on with work because I have work to do. And do you know what I did? Got my car and I drove to a local park and I sat and listened to music. I watched the sun, I watched the sun starting to set over the mountains. I'm very lucky I have that. It was a light breeze. It's a beautiful day here in Colorado, and there was a light breeze. And I sat in this park and watched the grass just flow through the wind.
Very cool.
And I gave myself 40 minutes. Gave myself permission to be.
Yeah.
I didn't. My phone was off. Well, my phone was on because I was listening to music, but otherwise, not available for text messages. I'm not available for phone calls. I'm not available for anything. I'm available right now for me, so that I can show up for others.
Yeah.
That's about being in the autonomy. So giving yourself permission. That's why I'm going to go off on a tangent. It's why pretty much I show up the way I do. It's why the book was birthed. And it's really been such a beautiful reflection, because if you had asked me several months ago, was I going to write a book, let alone lead a book with 15 other people from 5 continents? That's my answer. I would have laughed in your face. Yes, I always knew I was going to write a book. Yes, I've always known that. How and when and where and why and how it was going to show up, no idea.
Yeah.
And yet it happened, and it happened in 3 months. From honestly, from the first conversation to publication date, 3 months.
Wow.
And the reflections I'm receiving back from my fellow authors and from readers, really mostly from the authors, because the readers is impacting differently. From the authors, I had them all on my show to introduce them to the world. And I was like, and I asked each one of them, I was like, why did you show up for this? Right? I'm unproven. I've never written a book before, let alone led a project. And I'm not dealing with people that are well established in their businesses, well established in their lives, have all the things, right? All the check boxes next to their names. Why did you show up?
Yep.
The answer's been,
what's that?
Every single time is because you showed up. And you're willing to go there. And if you're willing to go there, I'm willing to go there too. And I get what you're after. What you're after is for other people to do exactly the same. Go to that dark, dank, scary, terrifying corner of our lives and go look at it. Go sit in the muck. And guess what? It wasn't bad. Yeah, you may have sit in it for a while. And it's not as scary as you once thought. It's not as dirty as you once thought. And you get to love on it. I was like, yeah, that's what I'm about. Because once we do that, we release it. It no longer has a hold or a power over us. It doesn't. Every single time you run away from it, it has all of your power. All of it. So the moment you speak to it, the moment that you love and honor it, and you continue to pour love in that place of you get to show up. Because no one else has ownership over that.
Very cool. Very beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So I wanted to quickly touch on one thing, and then I want to talk about your book a little bit more. I love the concept of getting out and doing some time by yourself, and I do that. I have 2 different times in the day that I set aside for me. One is first thing in the morning. I'm an early riser, so I get up at 5 and I do my morning stuff, my reading, my exercise, and all those types of things in the morning to set me up for success during the day. And then in the afternoon, I always go for a walk with my dog around the block. 1, because I like getting out, and 2, because I have 5 daughters and a wife. And so there's 6 women in my household, and we just need to get away for a minute. So we go for,
I have 1 part-time. I get it.
so we go for a walk for about 20 minutes or so. And it's just it's a beautiful time. I usually put my my headphones in and listen to a podcast or something uplifting, or lots of times I'll just sit in my own thoughts and think about what I want, or what's going well in my life, what could be going better. And I think that's really a great thing to do, to get outside and to be by yourself for a little bit of time each day. It doesn't have to be very long. Like I said, I do it for 15, 20 minutes, go on a walk with the dog, and I feel much better usually when I get home.
Mhm.
So that's
Now I'm
great.
going to ask you something.
What's
Now,
that?
it's still warm where you are, right?
It's in the high 20s, low 30s.
Oh, okay. Oh, right, because you're in Utah. I'm
Mhm.
thinking for some reason I was like, I had you in Arizona.
No.
In Arizona. Yeah, so it's chilly there too.
Mhm.
So as it gets warmer, or if you have reflections of this, what it feels like to be barefoot in nature.
Mm.
Next time when you have opportunity, barefoot in nature and barefoot in the grass in particular, and what that does, how that makes you feel.
Yeah.
It's something that I didn't know, I didn't understand for a long time. I always knew. I mean, I have very, very distinct, very clear knowledge throughout my life. I was barefoot a lot. I love shoes. I have lots of beautiful shoes, and I love taking them off. The moment I have an opportunity to take them off in grass, I do. I walk barefoot as often as I can, and I can tell you, like I remembered as a kid how good that felt. I didn't quite understand then what I understand now, that we're connected, that we are part of nature. We're already connected, and what we're doing is just reconnecting. We're reconnecting with our birthing route, with our own soul, and with our own source. And that's why it actually feels so good.
Yeah. That grounding, for
Mhm.
sure. I agree. And that's something that definitely I don't do enough of.
Mhm.
It's not that I don't like it, because I do, but definitely something that was a great um, strategy that I should start implementing more in my life. So thank you for sharing that.
You're
I really
welcome. So what
appreciate
you can do come warmer weather,
it. Right.
when snow is on the ground. I don't know for you, there's a little snow here.
Yeah.
The girls, y'all go in your yard, just take your shoes off and you run around and you're playing with them. So it's not like you have to necessarily like, I got to be silent and still and barefoot in nature. It's like I could be running around and playing and being present with what's happening with and around me, and still being barefoot.
Sure.
And curious about that, how that shifts within you, what that does within you. So there's a little tidbit.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's great strategy or tool to use to get grounded or to be more present. So uh, I'm always looking for things to improve in that area. So thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about the book. So you co-author or organize the authors of this book. You said there's 15 other people, correct? Or 15 including you. Um,
16, including.
16. Okay.
Yeah.
So 15 and you that wrote this book. What is the name of the book?
The name of the book is Breakdown to Wake Up, Journey Beyond the Now. And it's available at donbates.com/Jocelyn Bellows, which I will share with you so you can put that in the show notes as well.
Yep.
And yeah, it really, the quick and dirty of that story is Dawn and I met with the intention of exchanging podcasts back in, I think, late August. And I knew very quickly in that conversation, I was like, there's something more here. I don't know what. I just know that I'm going to be doing, I know that there's going to be something that I'm going to be interacting with this woman at a larger scale. I just felt it. And by the end of that first conversation, I had a download. If you ever get downloads, like I had words coming out of my mouth that I was like, I don't know that, I know this is me, but I don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah.
What the words that were coming out of my mouth were, I was asking her to be on a panel with other speakers to speak about the breakup to wake up concept, because it was breakup to wake up initially. And mind you, I'm creating this panel as I'm speaking the words aloud. There was no panel. There was no panel. By the end of that day, I had 4 panels. By the end of that week, I had like 9.
Wow.
Several weeks later, I had like 13 and 4 panels. And mind you, we never talked about the podcast. To this day, we still have not talked about this podcast being on each other's. A week later, I called her. I said, hey, think this is what I want to call the panel. And I was looking for permission, which I was still in my, not in my strength.
Mm.
To which she responded, after 20 minutes of conversation, she's like, "This is your book," To which I was like, I didn't want to, because we talked about expletives, I said an expletive in her direction. And I also knew she was right. And I was like, all right, you're right. This is it. This is, and I knew it. I couldn't deny it at that point. Yes, I could have walked away. I could have been an Eeyore. I could have very easily been an Eeyore and said, I'm complacent in my world. And I was like, no, I'm showing up for this. She showed up for this. I'm showing up for this. 2 weeks later, we had 12 authors. Wow. By the time that we are closing off authorship, I was turning people away. I turned about a dozen people away.
Wow. That's
I knew
awesome.
I found something at that point. And it wasn't in this, my ego started to get really heavy through this, I'll be honest, which is, I had a breaking point, which is another story for another day. Or part of the breakdown. Part of the breakdown was really what it was. It all happened very quickly and very synchronistically. It wasn't like I was seeking this madness. It was just like, I'm this pillar of light, and this is, I'm showing up, and everyone showed up, and they were so willing to go to those dark places, and I was so proud of them. And there's so many other stories that came with that, but I was so proud of each and every one of them to really be so willing to lay their heart onto the page, and the impact that it's going to have in so, not just their lives, but so many.
So yeah, that's amazing that it came together that so fast, it sounds like. So the premise of the book is people telling their story. And what are most of the stories or breakthrough moments that these people had? Is there one, I know you probably love them all, but is there one story in particular that you could share briefly on what the readers, kind of give them a glimpse of what the book would be about?
There are many, and yes, the one that, and then there are a multitude. So I'm just going to kind of give categories, and then there's one that I really want to talk to.
Okay.
So obviously, for me, I talked about my divorce and finding, the love for myself. We've got a couple that talk about alcohol addictions, and one that busted up more than a marriage, have busted up their soul consciousness. Another one who talks about alcohol addiction and how he had to let go. He's a an anesthetist, and how that affected his livelihood. His marriage is still intact. A few that talk about their longstanding relationship with religion and having to change that. Someone who left a cult. A couple that talk about workplace disharmony, because we can get addicted to our work and it can be very unhealthy for us. And most of them were really, a lot of them, a common theme with all of them was ego driven, and breaking up with our egos and acknowledging that we are these beautiful souls, and our egos kept us small and safe and actually pretty fractured in truth.
Yeah.
The one that really stands out for me, probably and a few about parenting as well, which, side note, as I read each chapter, which was synchronistic, I was living out components of each chapter in my real life as I was reading them. One of which was like about neglectful parenting. And it came in at the end of like the last hour, and I had to read it. And I thought I had to read it and get it done, get it off for the publisher to review. While my 6-year-old son was sitting by himself watching TV on my phone, because I was being a neglectful parent, because I felt like I had to do this other thing right then and there and not be present with my son. So, by the way, those occurrences happened throughout the entire experience of that piece. The one that really distinctly I want to share is Lisa Berry. So Lisa wrote about menopause. And the why I'm so proud of this one, and not that I'm not proud of the other ones, but this one was literally unfolding as the book was coming to life. Wow. Lisa committed to writing a chapter. She was putting it off and putting it off and putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And I don't know that to be Lisa at all. She was really avoidant. And 2 days before the first round chapter is due, like the first draft is due, I still didn't know what she was writing about. And everyone else had sort of submitted their topic and their concept or had submitted early. And she leaves a message with me, and she's a really pippy, pipey, like super joyous person. She leaves me these voice memos, and she's in tears. And she said, Jocelyn, I just took a pregnancy test, and I found out I'm starting menopause. And that's what I want to write about. And so as much as people look at me and say, wow, what courage she has to like step through that, I look at her and I looked at the courage this woman had, still has, because she thought she was pregnant. She didn't want to have a child, by the way. That was not part of her dream of life. And what came crashing down was the reality that her body was shifting magnificently in a different direction. And she questioned her womanhood. She questioned her sexual prowess. She questioned her attractiveness to her partner. All of that came down, like that big identity of a womanhood came crashing down.
Yeah.
And she faced that in the tumultuous nature, because that was 3 days before that first chapter was due. And she wrote about it as it was unfolding. And I didn't even know this about her, and I've known her for quite some time. She's been with a partner for 3 years. Nobody, and she's a public figure. Nobody knows that very few people know she has a partner. And here she is talking about it in the book.
Wow.
About her partner. She's like, I don't talk about that stuff with my life. Our life is wonderful and beautiful. And talk about like, a hero, right? Yes, there's stuff going on, behind the curtain, and she still does it anyway. So that story, when she talks about, I don't know if I'm attractive. What happens if my partner leaves me? Am I beautiful anymore? Can I, I was, as women, we were meant to be on this earth to reproduce. No, granted, that was her choice to not want, she didn't want that, right? But
Right.
before they got the results of the test, when she was thinking, oh gosh, I think I'm pregnant, like all the questions that went through her of questioning, do I want to be a parent? Could this be really exciting? Could this be amazing? What a beautiful gift. To have it all come crashing down. And really the heroism of herself to own and love and honor and have those tough decisions and have those tough conversations before and after. And then to actually introduce the world to the fact that she has a partner.
Yeah.
That one was probably the most poignant for me, because it not only did illuminate her ability to really go and be very vulnerable, it also allowed me to really step into my own leadership, because it was beautiful and she had to go deeper. And I sent it back to her like a few times and said, no, we got to do this, and you got to go here, and you got to go here, and you got to go here. And I had to press on her for that. And I had to press on her. Chose to, and she chose to show up every single time. So yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So those are the things that happen behind the scenes of books, by the way. I had no idea. And I'm signing up for more. So stay tuned. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. And for that woman to share those experiences real time. Like so often I hear oftentimes in my space when I talk to people who share horrific things that have happened to them or hard things that have happened, they always say, don't share the wound, share the scar. So wait till it's kind of had time to heal a little bit. And so for her to share that in the moment must have been extremely, like you said, heroic and hard, difficult, especially someone who it sounds like is a very private person sharing some of those private things with the world, not that everybody that knows her probably went and grabbed a book and read it and knows everything now, but there's probably people that did. And they're probably like, I had no idea this was going on. So it takes a lot of courage to show up like that. And so kudos to her. Kudos to to all the people in your book. It sounds like an amazing book. I'm gonna have to go check it out and get my own copy. I have not had a chance to look into it and get a copy yet.
We met 2 days ago. I think you're okay.
Yeah. But I am an avid reader, and I love reading and learning things like that. So definitely going to check it out. And I hope anybody who else that those topics ring true with you, which I think sounds like there's a broad variety of things that almost every single person has gone through sometime in their life or will go through or knows somebody going through that definitely can help so many people. So that's amazing that you did that, and thank you for sharing that story. And yeah, I'm super excited for you. uh I want to ask one more question, and I always like to ask this, is because this show is called Unleash Your Greatness, what would you say is the top one, two, or three things that somebody needs to do in order to unleash or unlock the greatness within themselves?
First thing is always start with loving yourself.
Yeah.
The moment that you feel off course and someone's coercing you to do something that doesn't feel aligned, or you think that you're starting to take steps out of things that are really misaligned, pull yourself back to center. Start there.
Beautiful.
Second, especially at the beginning of the year, since we're all doing New Year's resolutions, which, by the way, we should be always, I'm going to take away should because I hate that word. We always get to evaluate where we are in life and what we want, our goals that we want to achieve. Yeah. So that big, hairy, audacious goal feels out of reach. Do it anyway.
Yep.
Take the step towards it. You don't have to accomplish it all, right?
Right.
When I started my podcast, truthfully, I had to download one day on a drive. The podcast, the download, I couldn't deny it, right? Song came on the radio. All of a sudden, these words are coming into my mind, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm voice texting myself because I was driving alone. And within 20 minutes, I had the name of the show, the first 20 guests I was going to ask, what the show was going to be about, and I was just going to do it, right? I had all this boom, boldness in me. Took me 3 weeks to buy my first microphone. It took me another 3 weeks to ask my first guest to be on my show. Oh yeah, and I also hate my voice. That was a story I told myself. Here I am 2 years later, I don't know, 70, 80 shows in, and now a TV show to boot, and a handful of innocent Facebook Lives along the way. Yeah. You know, I'm no different than anyone else, right? These are the gifts that I have. These are the gifts that I'm going to continue to step forward in. Is it scary? Heck yeah, it is. I had to catch myself. I almost dropped the F-bomb. I won't. Getting really close. I think we're good. Take a step in the direction of your dreams.
Yeah.
Take it. Who cares if you fall on your knees? Do you know how many entrepreneurs, do you know those successful people in the freaking world, how many times they've fallen on their knees? Oh, yeah. Ask any of them. Ask anyone. And I'm not even take that. Ask people in your circle, someone you admire, that you feel comfortable asking, how'd you do it? And not even that, what did it feel like? I will guarantee they will tell you their failure after failure after failure after failure after failure, and it kept going anyway. Yep. That's what you get to do.
Yeah.
You get to write the chapter. You get to write the story of your life. Nobody else does.
Beautiful. Thank you. That was some great inspiration. I agree fully with you. Go big on your dreams. Love yourself, and you do get to write your next chapter. You get to be the captain of your boat and sail it where you want to go, and you don't have to let anybody else tell you otherwise. So, very inspiring. Great perspective and reminders for me that always do those things, because that's one reason why I love doing interviews like this, is because even though so many times we hear things like that, but we need to be reminded over and over and over again to do them, because repetition brings clarity and hopefully momentum as we start working on those things. And so I love that you shared all those things. Those are great things that anybody who's listening to this should be focusing on. Love yourself, go after big goals, take a step each day towards it, even if it is just a small step, and then be the captain of your ship. Write your chapter. You have the choice to be who you want to be. And um, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Is there any last thoughts that you just want to share right before we wrap up?
I do. I want to actually revisit one thing that you shared earlier about going for a walk and being with your thoughts.
Okay.
And I want to kind of go back to that because, as we talked about earlier, scheduling space for yourself, the quiet
Mm-hmm.
is where you receive the most beautiful answers for you. So yeah, I come back to that. As much as yes, you want to honor and love yourself, scheduling that actually this is part of it is by scheduling that time for you or taking that time out for you, allowing your mind to go soft, where your brilliance really is. And I know it can be scary. Girl from who lived in New York in her 20s and didn't like having 30 minutes to herself. I literally didn't. Now schedules hours and hours and hours of alone time and relishes it.
Yeah. Very cool. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that last little tidbit. I really appreciate it. So, everybody, I want to say thank you so much, Jocelyn Bellows, for being on the show. Your insights were amazing. Your story is fantastic. Uh, I think everybody at some level can relate to what you've gone through or are going through in their life. So, thank you for sharing that. And I appreciate the energy that you brought and the personality. I love it. Um, so thank you so much for being on the show. And if you want to connect with Jocelyn, feel free to click the links underneath this episode. Uh, I'll make sure to list all those where her book, her website, all those things are, so that you can connect with her. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Such a joy. Thank you so much for this time.